Shabbat Shalom. This week's lesson is going to be based on the Haftorah reading, which is in Malachim Aleph, which is Malachim is what, class?
First Kings.
What's Malachim? The word Malachim. The word Malachim is kings. The I am on the end of the word denotes what? Plurality. So if it was Malak, what would it be? Remove the I am, and that would make it singular. So a Malak would be king. Right. So Malachim is kings. And then with the Hebrew language, the Aleph is which letter of the Hebrew alphabet? The first one. So if you want to write the number 1 in Hebrew, you would write what? Aleph. Yes. So Malachim Aleph is first kings. And it's like the Spanish language, it's like backwards to all of us who are English speakers. Shabbat Shalom Nefesh. It's like, Shabbat Shalom Barb, it's like the Spanish speakers. So instead of it being Aleph Malachim, or first kings, it would be Malachim Aleph, kings first. Like as in Spanish would be, you know. There you go, Barb, you've got it. So we're going to begin reading this week's Haftorah. Shabbat Shalom, Jean. I got made fun of by one of my good friends. He was just kind of playing with me. And he said that I made him think of Aunt Norma's romper room. When people check in, I'll say, "Oh, there's Jean. It's nice to see you, Jean. And there's Tiffany." And all that. And he said it was like the cadence, and my voice was like, eh. And so now I'm hyper conscious of it. So Shabbat Shalom, everybody. I'm so pleased to see you here tonight. You know, it really does bless me to see when you check in, because I feel so supported, and that means a lot to me. Some people watch, but they don't check in, and so I don't know, you know, who is here and who isn't. So when you do check in, Randall, I was just talking about you, sweetheart, and so it really is a blessing to me. So who would like to be the first to read? Okay. Lisa's going to read first, and I'm going to tilt the camera so that she can be on camera. There we go. This is Lisa Adams, and she's going to begin reading Malachim Aleph, 1 Kings, beginning at chapter 1, verse 1. And as she's reading, I'm going to be very rude and interrupt her and insert comments, okay? So, as it is written.
Now King David was old and stricken in years, and they covered him with clothes, but he got no heat.
Why don't you read from my version?
I was going to say, it doesn't really explain it very well.
There you go. Read from my version.
King David grew old.
Okay, hold on. At this point, David, King David, he was only 70 years old. He wasn't that old, and especially for those days. So when it said that he grew old, it was kind of really more talking about his health than it was about his years. Okay.
Okay. The year took their toll. The years took their toll, and he couldn't get warm from them when he covered them with bedclothes.
So it didn't matter how many blankets he put on. He just couldn't get warm. Mm-hmm.
His servants said to him, "Let us try to find a young virgin for my lord the king. She can wait on the king and be a companion for him."
Okay, hold on just a minute. Now, some interpretations will refer to her as a damsel, a young damsel, but that word translated actually is a virgin. She was a virgin.
Okay. And she can lie next to you so that my lord the king will get some heat. And after looking through all of Israel's territory of a beautiful girl, they found
Abishag
and the Shunammite.
Okay, hold on right there. So, in the original script, it will say, actually reads that her name was Avishag, the Shunammite. Now, the Shunammite would not a Shunammite, but the Shunammite, because this is to let the reader know later we're going to be reading about how King David's son, the very one we're talking about, he ends up marrying this woman. And so this is to give a key to the person reading or hearing this to know, yes, it's that Shunammite woman. It's the same woman. It is the Shunammite that we're going to hear about later on.
And brought her to the king. Um, the girl was very beautiful and became a companion for the king. She took care of him, put the king, but the king did not have sexual relations with her.
Okay, hold on right there. Now, the purpose of her being there was to keep him warm. He, according to the sages, um, he was no longer able to perform a husband's duties toward a wife at that time. And some of the drashes on the subject says that because he had not been appropriate sexually with Bathsheba, that everything comes around at some point in your life, and that later on he was now no longer to have sexual relations. But that is what their drash says. Whether that's true or not true, we don't know. But at whatever the case is, this was the case in David's. Also, he would not have taken her as a wife. And the reason we know that he did not take her as a royal wife is because his son later marries her. And he would not have been able to marry this Shunammite woman, Absalom. But why? Why wouldn't he be able to, Wyatt?
Well, the law says you can't sleep with your father's wife.
Exactly. Exactly, because it's found in Leviticus 18:8, do not have sexual relations with your father's wife. That would dishonor your father. So he would be then, and besides Bathsheba, she pressed for this marriage to take place. You'll find that later on in 1 Kings 2nd chapter where he does. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, Adoniah, the son of Haggit, was beginning to claim that he would be king. To this end, to this end, he organized chariots and horsemen with 50 men to run ahead of him. Um, his father had never in his life confronted him by asking, "Why are you having this way?"
Okay, behaving this way.
Behaving
Okay,
this way.
I'll
Sorry.
stop right there. So David was now in this helpless, weakened state. He was weak, he was not strong, he had taken to his bed, he was cold all the time, and so he is in a low place. And Adonijah, he is taking advantage of his father's position. He's taking advantage of his father's weakened state for his own gain. Now, Adoniah was born at the time that David was reigning in Hebron. And so now this means that, doing the math, Adoniah would have been anywhere between 33 and 40 years of age. So he was not like a young guy, fairly young, but he was mature enough. But he had been spoiled rotten. Now, he was the king's fourth son. He was not his firstborn. But it says that he was his oldest son. He was the oldest son at the time, but he had had three brothers previous to him. And so he was now the the oldest at that time. Let's see. Go ahead.
Okay. Moreover, he was a very handsome man. He was born next after Abisham. This he confirmed with Yaav, the son of Tazarah.
That's
And
actually Zeruiah.
okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'm
He
not very good at
conferred
pronouncing
with
this.
Joab, the son of Zeruiah,
And
Eviatar,
Avatar
the
and
Cohen.
Cohen.
Okay, now let's just hold on right there. Now, we have in verse 7 here, and let's see. Um, Okay, so Adoniah, the son of Haggit. So David was their common father, but it was a different wife. So he was a daughter of Haggit, and he was beginning to claim that he was going to be king. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that he really believed that he would be king, but because he was the firstborn in line now, but it does not mean that he didn't know any better, because he should have known that the Lord had told David that Solomon, was going to be the king in his place. But because his father, David, had never made a public announcement, he had not publicly said, he had not made a proclamation before all of Israel that that Shlomo was going to be king. So what does he do? He sees his father's in a weakened state, and so he jumps the gun, and he has set himself up. Now, I want to break down these people. Lisa was just saying that he was beginning to claim that he was going to be king. To this end, he organized chariots and horsemen with 50 men to run ahead of him. Okay, now this is something that a king would do.
Right.
Wherever they went. So he was what? He was riding in the president's limo. You know what I mean? For any public looking on to see this, he was presenting himself. So what is the assumption going to be amongst the people?
Well, that
He's going to be
the
king.
next king.
He clearly has to have been established
The
as the
next
king. Otherwise, he would not have the chutzpah
Yeah.
to present himself as the king, would he? Okay. So it goes on to say 50 men to run ahead of him. Okay, so then Lisa was saying, would you read that verse 6 then again, please?
Okay. His father had never in his life confronted him by asking, "Why are you behaving this way?"
So his father never corrected his behavior. So what do we call that today if a parent doesn't correct their child's behavior?
Spoiled brat.
Spoiled brat. He was what? He was accustomed to behaving disrespectfully, dishonorably. He didn't have good character building. And so this is a very clear picture of what happens when we don't correct our children, when we
It's
don't
kind of
raise
like
them up.
it's kind of like a parent's child taking their credit card or their favorite car out to go and drive and do whatever they want with it. That's kind of like what David's son is doing right now.
And in a
And-
sense, it is, but what he was doing was trying to present an image to the public, anybody looking on, that he already had this
He
position.
had the seat. Yeah.
You know, he already had this position. So anybody looking on would believe, oh, well, he
He's our
must
next
already
king.
have the position.
But it
And so
was-
the next thing to follow is going to be his swearing in.
But it wasn't finalized.
Right.
No,
No.
not at all. And so go ahead.
And moreover, he was a very handsome man, and he was born next after Abishom.
So that's telling us that he was the one that came after Absalom. So we know now that he was the fourth child. So he had had three brothers previous. So now this is telling us that the way the Eastern religions were and in their dynasties, the oldest son would normally take the throne of the fathers. That would be the normal thing. So this is telling us that it wouldn't be a stretch for the people looking on. They would think that this
That
is
was
the normal
natural
thing.
thought,
This
yeah.
would be, nothing. Of course, they would assume that since he would be the oldest.
Right.
I'm guessing that the other three were probably dead.
Yes.
So Absalom, and then the one that he killed, and then I don't know the third one. So.
Okay. He conferred with
Yoav.
Yoav and the son of
Who was the son of Zeruiah.
Zeruiah.
Okay, now hang on right there. Yoav. Yoav was the son of Zeruiah, who was King David's sister. And if you're interested in reading about that, you can look at that in 1 Chronicles 2:13 through 17. So he was one of David's nephews. Okay, so we're talking about David's son. He has in his inner circle of support people supporting him in this, Yoav. And now we're going to see which Yoav. This is Yoav, the son of Zeruiah,
He's the,
David's sister. This would make him one of David's nephews.
wasn't he the like the general of the army? Is that the same one?
Yes, in fact, Yoav's brothers were two of David's, what they referred to as his brave warriors. They were like, his. So there was Abashi, Asael. Those were those two warriors that were, really important men in David's military campaigns. And so Joab was positioned as the commander of David's armies because he won this fabulous victory over the Jebusites. And that's how they ended up with possession of Jerusalem. So you see, what does he do? The son has this very close alignment with someone who has a very high reputation in the community. He's very well known. He is a big wig militarily. Okay.
Okay. And Abiatar, the Cohen,
Uh-huh.
and they both supported Adonijah.
Mm-hmm.
But
Okay, stop right there because that I don't want you to jump ahead of me.
Okay.
You read faster than I can catch
I
up
don't know
with.
about that.
Honey, what are you doing?
Trying to get these people online.
Huh?
Wi-Fi.
Oh, okay. Okay, because you're distracting them from hearing what we're learning. And we're on YouTube.
Talk to you.
Okay. So Adoniah was able to claim kingship because he was the oldest, and so secretly to his inside circle, his inside men, they were conspiring together to steal this kingship from the rightful king Solomon. From the rightful king Solomon. I can't emphasize that enough. So he knew, and a lot of the Jews knew, that David had intended to make Shlomo his successor.
Right.
Okay, so
So not his son, but his nephew?
no, he was the support. He was in support of his son. Okay, so Adoniah, he had a lot of sway over the priesthood because he had in his pocket one of his own priests. I'm going to explain that just for a minute. Let's see. Let's see. Okay, so Solomon's supporters now, we're going to start in verse 8 here. And
Yes.
so we've already outlined that we've got Joab as a support, and then he has his own priest, his personal priest. I don't know what I did with that, but anyway.
Verse 7.
Okay, verse 7. What was his name?
Abiatar.
Okay.
Abiatar, and he was the Cohen.
Okay, very good. So we see the inside circle for Adoniah. So now we're going to look at Shlomo's. Everybody knows Shlomo is Solomon, right? His mama called him Shlomo, as in slow motion. Shlomo. That's it's been translated Solomon, but his name is Shlomo. We're going to start at verse 8.
Okay. And Zadok, and the Cohen,
Benya,
Abenya, the son of
Jehoiada,
Jehoiada, Nathan, the prophet, Shemai, Ray, and David's elite guard were not on Adonijah's side.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay, so
Not good at the names.
starting at verse 8, we have Zadok the priest. Now, what do you remember? What do you know about Zadok, the priesthood of the Zadokites? Yahweh promised David that he would have someone from his lineage sitting on his throne for perpetuality. But he also promised that the priesthood would come from the line of who?
Levi.
Yeah, but from what tribe, what lineage there? It was going to be from Zadok. Yeah, a Zadok.
The
It would
family
have to
line,
be
you mean?
from that
Yeah.
line, based out of the Aaronic line. So so Zadok was the rightful priest because he was from the right line. So he had served as high priest in the tabernacle at Gibeon under Shaul, under King Saul. And then when David became king, he had both Zadok and Abiathar share. Not good. What do? What did they say? You can't have two heads, can you?
No.
There was to be one Kohen Haggadah, one high priest. But what does David do? He tries to straddle the fence here, and he has one high priest and another high priest. And what ends up happening is when push comes to shove, Zadok stays with David, and Abiathar, he goes with Adoniah. And so he's now in the other camp. Okay.
Okay.
Which may have resulted, there may have been some jealousy that went on between these two high priests for them to split like that. At some point, there had to be some kind of conflict to cause this split. Or maybe he's saying, I'm throwing my weight behind this guy and I'm, split, like what we see today, right?
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay. One day, Adonijah.
Wait a minute. Did we get to Benya? Yeah, we did. Okay. But Zadok the Cohen and Benaiah, also pronounced Benya, the son of Jehoiada. Okay, so now we're going to we looked at Zadok, right? Now we're going to look at another key figure that was in support of Shlomo, the rightful king, which is Benya or Benaniah. He was the captain of the king's bodyguard, and he was a rival of Joab. Now, we just talked about Joab. Remember, he was the head of the commander of David's armies. He's the one that is now in support of Abiah. So we have Benya. He was captain of the king's bodyguard. So now we've got these two really tough military heads. We have two religious heads, and we have a split in the kingdom. Okay, so then we have Natan the prophet. Now, Natan the prophet was a favorite he was the prophet to the king. He was a favorite of David's, and he was the most intimate into the royal court of the king, okay, in relations with the whole royal family. He was in the presence of the king and ministered to the king and gave advice to the king. So he is with the rightful heir with Shlomo. So who do we have? We have, name one in Shlomo's court, his inside men. Name one.
Nathan. You said that one.
Natan,
Nathan.
the prophet, and Zadok, the
Benaiah.
priest, and Benaiah, or Benya, military power. Okay, now you can go on.
Okay. One day, Adonijah killed sheep, oxen, and fatted calves at the stone of Jalat by Engol. He summoned all of his brothers and king's sons and all the men of Yehuda, the the king's servants, but he did not summon Natan the prophet of Benaiah, the elite guard of Shlomo his brother.
Okay. Okay, you can take a seat, and Wyatt, if you want to come up, please. So, let's see.
You're using the complete
I
Jewish
am.
version?
I
Okay.
am. Shmi, let's see where that is.
So,
11.
11.
No, let's see.
What are you looking for?
Verse 9 is what I just read.
Yeah. Oh, here I'm.
Did you say it?
Okay. Benaiah the son, Natan the prophet, Shemi, Rei, Shemi. Shemi, I wanted to say, and this is in 8. Shemi was one of Solomon's um, great officers listed in 1 Kings 4:18, which is, of course, going to be later on. And Ray, or Rei, but it would be Ray, um, he is the same as Ira, the same person as that's interpreted Ira, and that's found in 2 Samuel 20th chapter 26. He was a descendant of Yair, and he was David's personal priest, his own personal priest. That is who Ray was. And then it says, and the mighty men, also had the mighty men. And these could have been some of the, oh shoot, what are they called? Not the Nephilim, but their progeny. They
The
also
Anakim?
the Anakim. It's descendants like um, Goliath was of Gath, that they may have been. It's been some speculation that they may have been redeemed ones from that, or they had been mercenaries. I don't believe that they can be redeemed. I'm just saying what I've read. But because that term mighty men often refers to the Anakim. So they may have been mercenaries that threw their lot in with him. At any rate, that was who he had. So also in verse 9, where Lisa just read, one day Adoniah killed sheep and oxen, fatted calves at the stone of Zochelet by the En Rogel. En Rogel was situated east of Jerusalem. It was a wide, flat plain, and this is where they did a lot of feasts were held there, and a lot of celebrations were held there. And this was a place that was a very public place that everybody was familiar with. There was a reason why he was doing this there, so that he could make a very public display. You know, sort of like you might say today when we have a politician who goes to a town in a very public place and has a what?
Press conference.
Or a rally.
Yeah.
And people are all very aware, and they have music, and people show up, hopefully by the hordes, right?
Mhm.
And so this would be an ancient equivalent of having a rally for support. Um, and so this is what would have happened. It was a common place where they often held, you know, like a big football stadium. Was something very common. People were accustomed to seeing a lot of activity going on there. And also, this is a place where they would hold these fabulous feasts, and the people would slaughter and dress out the animals, as well as go ahead and cut them up and serve them. Everything was done all right there, right there in the presence of everyone. So Adonai's feast at this place, En Rogel, it was like over the top. Okay, so Wyatt, if you could pick up there.
Verse 11.
Mm-hmm.
Natan went to Bathsheba, the mother of Shlomo, and said, "Haven't you heard that Adoniah, the son of Haggit, has become king without the knowledge of David our Lord?"
Okay, hold on just a second. I also wanted to add to this that this was a purely political move on, on Adoniah's part. Him holding this was presumptive. This was his way of making sure that everybody got the message that he was already declared king, because it was the kings who would hold these fabulous feasts and would invite all of these dignitaries. And so it was to gain popularity and also to secure support for his claim to the throne. And now Natan approaches Bathsheba.
Okay,
Ruby.
keep going.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so
Sorry.
now come, please, let me give you advice so that you can save both your own life and that of your son Shlomo. Go, get in to see King David, and say to him, "My lord king, didn't you swear to your servant, your son Shlomo will be king after me?"
Okay,
was-
hold on right there. So Natan, the prophet, he was very well aware of, of Yahweh's will that Shlomo was going to succeed David. First Chronicles 22:9. But you will have a son who will be a man of peace and rest, and I will give him rest from all his enemies on every side. His name will be Shlomo, and I will grant Israel peace and quiet during his reign. And so um, he wanted to make sure that he was going to interject himself and help this woman along, help her. He was one who initiated it. He approaches Bathsheba. He talks to her. He was very well aware that Shlomo was to be king. Okay, go ahead.
He will sit on my throne. So why is Adoniah king? Right then, while you're still talking with the king, I will come in also in after you and confirm what you're saying.
So he got it all set up. He made the plan. He was the brains. So now, why didn't Natan? He was accustomed to being part of the inner circle with Malek David. Why didn't he go in and talk to David himself? I would let everybody pitch in on this, but you can't be seen on camera. Why would you suppose Natan wouldn't just go and approach the king himself
Um,
instead of approaching Bathsheba?
Because the king's uh, the king is very weak right now, and he doesn't even know what's going on.
I think maybe
He's not in
he
his right mind.
maybe he needed two people to come in rather than him just going there. He needed, so it's almost like the witness of at least two people. So
That's a good point. That's a good point. I think also it could be that this was going to be a very severe blow to, and this is a very personal matter between a husband and a wife. Our son.
mhm.
Look at what our son. Look at what our son has done. The wife can cushion this with her husband.
Didn't the kings have so much power that they pretty much could behead somebody if they upset them enough?
Yeah,
I mean, there's a lot
that's
of fear
true.
there,
Do you
isn't
think?
there?
Do you think maybe this has to do also with? I mean, it's just speculation. Last time Nathan went in and confronted David, you know,
Yeah, he's trying to stay away from
yeah, he's
Well, that's the last time we have it recorded
Yeah,
that he went
right.
in.
I was actually it actually kind of lit a light bulb in my head because I've been.
Now remember, they can't hear you and they can't see you. So when you're talking, any of you are talking, it's dead silence here. So make it real short.
So I came to this point a lot where a mom and dad, if their child is misbehaving a lot, and if you were to go directly to the parent yourself, the parent will be mad at you and not their kid. So you need at least somebody to be there to back you up, to get proof, to show them exactly what their kid is doing and it's misbehaving and wrong, that the parent needs to correct their child.
Well, that is a good point. I
Good
mean,
point.
you know, the first the first time recorded, Nathan went in and basically accused David, but this time it's his kid, so it
Yeah.
is a little different.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
It-
yeah.
it
So,
kind of
go ahead and pick it up.
Okay. Bathsheba went into the king in his room. The king was very old. Abishag the Shunammite was in attendance on the king. Bathsheba bowed, prostrating herself to the king. The king asked, "What do you want?" She answered him, "My lord, you swore by Adonai your God to your servant, your son Shlomo will be king after me. He will sit on my throne. But now, here is Adonijah ruling as king, and you, my lord the king, don't know anything about it. He has killed oxen, fattened calves, and sheep in great numbers, and he has summoned all the sons of the king, Abiatar the Cohen, and Joab the commander of the army. But he didn't summon Shlomo, your servant. As for you, my lord the king, all Israel is watching you. They are waiting for you to tell them who is to sit on the throne of my lord the king after him. If you don't, then, well, when my lord the king sleeps with his ancestors, I and my son Shlomo will be considered criminals.
Okay, hold on right there. Okay, so I just, when I was preparing this lesson, I really felt like it was important for us to establish that it is Yahweh who sets up kingdoms and tears them down. It is the Lord God who puts people in positions of power, whether it is um, a king that is going to be the king that we cry out for and want, but God says, you wanted him,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or whether he is the one that people are praying for and pleading with God to please have mercy and be gracious. And he says, okay, I'll give you this leader. Whatever that case is, nothing happens outside of the will of the Almighty. El Elyon, which means what? Remember last week's lesson? El Elyon is what? God Most High God above all other gods. So, with that lesson in mind, Deuteronomy 17:15, be sure to appoint over you a king the Lord your God chooses. He must be from among your fellow Israelites. Do not place a foreigner over you, one who is not an Israelite. Okay, that's from Deuteronomy 17. And then in Daniel, verse 2, starting at verse 20 through 21, and declared, blessed be the name of God forever and ever, for wisdom and power belong to him. He changes the times and seasons. He removes kings and establishes them. He gives wisdom to the wise and knowledge to the discerning. He reveals the deep and hidden things. He knows what lies in darkness. And what have we been praying every week is that everything that has been done in secret will be revealed. He knows what lies in darkness, and light dwells with him. But did you catch that? He removes kings and establishes kings.
Mm-hmm.
Even the evil kings, it may not be his desire for them to be, but you know what? Sometimes he'll say, you know what? Fine, you've got it. Now, what are you going to do? You know?
I was thinking specifically lately about which prophet was it, Amos, or maybe not Amos, but the one where God said, this even worse group of people than Israel is going to come and wipe you out, and he's like, that doesn't make sense.
Uh-huh.
And so I was kind of thinking, well, sometimes that happens to us, that God will judge us by worse people than we are just because we're not obeying Him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or it's kind of like when we beg or ask God for something so badly, and then God's all like, you don't want this, you don't want this, and then it gets to the point where God's like, fine, now what are you gonna give?
Yeah.
And then you're all like praying to God and saying, just take it away,
Yeah.
just take it away.
Yeah. Mhm. So now no one was really sure who was going to take the throne, because on one hand, um, you know, the Lord had said that Shlomo was going to be the king. And yeah, on the other hand, Absalom was the oldest. And so people were not real clear. And so when they were seeing all this hoopla,
Well, didn't Nathan anoint Shlomo?
We're not there yet.
Oh.
And so when they witness all of this activity going on and so on, you know that they have to be thinking, oh, well, I guess that makes sense. He is the oldest, after all. So let's see.
Verse 22.
Okay. And so I just wanted to say about that at that time, and in fact, even today in that region of the world, whenever a king dies, it is tradition that their oldest son would take that. And so it would have been something that would have been normal. However, whenever and often, whenever the succeeding king would take the throne, the existing king would declare who was going to take his throne long before he ever died. And the succeeding king actually did take the position on the throne before the king died. It was always toward the end, it was always very near the end of their life. But if he had announced who was going to be king, and it was maybe 7 more years before he passed, it could be that that king would go ahead and take the throne at that time, not necessarily upon death. So, yeah. Okay, go ahead. Oh, I and my son. Bathsheba says, I and my son would be counted as what? How does it work?
Criminals.
Criminals. And what happened to the family of the,
They were killed.
Yeah.
they were killed. They would have been killed. So this was life and death for both Bathsheba and Shlomo. They would have been killed. Okay, go ahead.
Right then, while she was talking with the king, Natan the prophet entered. They told the king, Natan the prophet is here. After coming into the king's presence, he prostrated himself before the king with his face to the ground. Natan said, My lord king, did you say Adoniah is to be king after me? He will sit on my throne? For he has gone down today and killed oxen, fattened calves, and sheep in great numbers, and he has summoned all the king's sons, the commanders of the army, and Abiathar the Cohen. Right now they are eating and drinking in his presence and proclaiming, Long live King Adoniah. But he didn't summon me, your servant, or Zadok the Cohen, or Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, or your servant Shlomo. Is this authorized by my lord the king without your having told your servant who would sit on the throne after my lord the king after him? King David answered by saying, Summon Bathsheba to me. She entered the king's presence and stood before the king. Then the king swore an oath, As Adonai lives, who has delivered me from all adversity, as I swore to you by Adonai, the God of Israel, your son Shlomo will be king after me. He will sit on my throne in my place. So will I do today.
And so he is renewing his promise. It's the same thing he promised her before. He's turning around and he's renewing it. He's reiterating to her that he is indeed going to fulfill that promise. Go ahead.
Bathsheba bowed with her face to the ground, prostrating herself to the king, and said, Lord, let my lord King David live forever. King David said, Summon Zadok the Cohen, Natan the prophet, and Benaiah the son of Jehoiada. They came before the king. The king said to them, Take with you the servants of your lord, have Shlomo my son ride on my mule, and bring him down to Gikon.
Okay, hang on just a minute. Now, the in the ancient East, during that time, princes rode on donkeys. And this is why Messiah was, riding on a donkey into Jerusalem. But there was a special state donkey it was only that donkey, and the only people who were able to ride that, unless they got a special permission, was going to be the prince or the king. And so for him to have Adoniah sit on that state donkey, that was a very public sign, because there's no way Adoniah would be able to ride on that donkey Okay, so does anybody know what the President of the United States, what his car is called?
Beast?
The Beast.
Yeah.
Anybody authorized to ride in the Beast except for the president?
Yeah.
So what if some other person was to get in the Beast?
They'd be
It would be
escorted out.
absolutely,
Yeah.
yeah. So, this donkey was the state donkey, like the Beast is for the president. And so the king has his son. He says, go get the beast out. He's going to ride in the president's car. He's going to ride the donkey."
Okay, keep going.
Hmm.
There, Zadok the Cohen and Natan the prophet are to anoint him king over Israel. Sound the shofar and say, "Long live King Shlomo." Then escort him back. He is to come and sit on my throne, for he is to take my place as king. I have appointed him to rule over Israel and Yehudah. Benaiah responded to the king by saying, "Amen. May Adonai the king, or the God of my lord the king, confirm it. Just as Adonai has been with my lord the king, so may he be with Shlomo, and make his throne even greater than the throne of my lord King David." So Zadok the Cohen, Natan the prophet, Benaiah the son of Yehoiada, and the Crete and the Pleti went down, had Shlomo ride on King David's mule, and brought him to Gikon.
Okay, hang on just a minute. Do you hear like a thumping sound outside?
Yeah.
What is that? Is that the trash can? The wind blowing the lid up and down on the trash can, maybe, or something?
Are
I
you
don't know.
living next to Aborigines and they're playing the drums?
I've never noticed them playing before. Okay, so now to anoint him with oil. This was something that was usually done with the priesthood. They would pour the oil over their head, let it run down their beard. But it was also done at the changing of a new dynasty, particularly if one is being disputed. So this was a public sign of this is being disputed, therefore we are anointing him. And this was the holy anointing oil, the sacred oil um, that came out of the tabernacle that was used when kings were anointed. Okay?
Okay, which one we were at? 39.
Um,
Yep.
yeah.
Let's see. Zadok the Cohen took the horn of olive oil out of the tent and anointed Shlomo. They sounded the shofar, and all the people shouted, "Long live King Shlomo." All the people escorted him back, playing flutes and rejoicing greatly, so that the earth shook with the sound.
So you ever go to a college football game? And you ever notice that when you're in the bleachers, when everybody's stomping and
Mhm.
yelling and cheering, or when the guys are on the field, or in the basketball courts, especially because that's all confined and everything is reverberating off the walls, it just gets your adrenaline pumping, doesn't it? I mean, how can you not get excited at a basketball game, you know? And so this cacophony was being raised by this excitement and the thrill of it. And well, my goodness, we know what happens, don't we? That all of that sound of what would be like the equivalent of a football game was heard by the opposing party. Let's go
Yep.
for it.
Adoniah and all his guests heard it while they were finishing their meal, but it was Joab who, when he heard the blast on the shofar, asked, "That noise, what's the meaning of this uproar in the city?" While he was still speaking, there came Jonathan, the son of Abiatar the Cohen. Adoniah said, "Come in. You're a worthy man, so you must be bringing good news." Jonathan answered Adoniah, "The truth is, our Lord King David has made Shlomo king. Moreover, the king sent with him Zadok the Cohen, Natan the prophet, Benaiah the son of Yehoiada, and the Crete and the Pleti. They had him ride on the king's mule. And Zadok the Cohen and Natan the prophet anointed him in Gikon. Then they escorted him back from there, rejoicing, so that the city is in an uproar. This is the noise you've been hearing. Moreover,
Don't you know that they were all going, oh,
it's like,
oh
it's like, oh no, it can't get worse. He's like, just wait.
no! Yeah.
Moreover, Shlomo is now sitting on the throne of King David of the kingdom. More than that, the king's servants came and blessed our Lord King David with these words. May God make the name of Shlomo better than your name, and his throne greater than your throne. After which the king bowed down on his bed. Finally, the king said, Blessed be Adonai, the God of Israel, who has given someone to sit on my throne today when my own eyes can see it.
And so he just described this messenger ran to Adoniah and he gave him all the details about the coronation. His brother has just been coronated. While they've been sitting there, how humiliating is that? With all of these people in this very public place and all of these attendants and all this food and music and wine and fireworks and balloons and confetti and
Yep. Everybody started looking at the clock. Oh, well, look at the time. You know what? I think I need to go.
yeah, in fact, that is exactly what happened. They vamoosed. They got out of there because they were afraid, because now just what would have happened with Bathsheba and Shlomo, they ran a great risk. And so they cut and got out of there.
They could have called the armies and descend on everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Kill them all.
Hmm hmm And so go
So,
ahead
yeah.
and let's look at what happens after
Yeah.
Adoniah gets the news that his brother has been coronated.
Good. At this, all Adoniah's guests grew frightened. They got up, everyone going his own way. Adoniah, too, was afraid because of Shlomo. He got up, went, and took hold of the horns of the altar.
Okay, we're going to stop right there. I want to explain that just for a minute. He caught a hold of the horns of the altar. In the outer
Right.
courtyard is the altar of burnt offering, and where the animal sacrifices were made. And there was always the blood of the animals that were sacrificed that was put on the four horns. And that's also where the animals were tied, where they were tied to the four horns. And this meant redemption, and it meant mercy. And so he goes to this and he hangs on to those horns of the altar, and that was considered to be a sanctuary, you know. And so he was like, I'm just gonna read Exodus 21:14 real quick. But if anyone schemes and kills someone deliberately, that person is to be taken from my altar and put to death. So anybody that's scheming, anybody that's murdered, they are you can see that they have to be taken from my altar. Therefore, they had to have gone to the altar. So he's confessing that he is guilty, and he's hoping for mercy. He's because he knows that he deserves. He's going ahead and going there. He's hanging on to that because from there, the choice is going to be made whether he's going to live or die, and that he has to be taken from the horns of the altar and led either to go on with his life or to be killed. And so that's what was happening there. Go ahead.
Shlomo was told, Here, Adoniah is terrified of King Shlomo. He has grabbed hold of the horns of the altar and is saying, First let King Shlomo swear to me that he will not have his servant executed. So Shlomo said, If he will demonstrate that he is a worthy man, not a hair on his not a hair of his will fall to the earth. But if he is found making trouble, he will die. So King Shlomo sent, and they brought him down from the altar. He came and prostrated himself before the king, Shlomo. And Shlomo said to him, Go on home.
Mm-hmm. Get out of here. I'm done looking at you. But it says that they brought him down from the altar. There was a ledge around the perimeter of the altar that the priest stood on, and so he was actually standing on the ledge, hanging on to the horns.
This actually kind of reminds me of the political party that we're dealing with right now.
So he bowed himself. He bowed himself to his brother, the king, and he was showing that he was in submission now to the king, that he was submitting It was obvious who the real king. Will the real king please stand up? And so, guys, I hope that you have enjoyed this lesson. Our nation is embroiled in probably one of the most um, contentious elections.
Yeah.
Without a doubt, contentious elections we have ever seen. And this has potential to be extremely damaging either way it goes. And you can see how if it swings one way, there can be severe things that happen. And if it swings the other way, there can also be some very severe things that happen. But what I want to encourage all of us is to know this. It is our God who establishes kingdoms and leaders, but it's our job to vote for the right man prayerfully. It's our job to behave appropriately and in a godlike manner. It is our job to pray for our leaders and for those leaders to behave in a godlike manner too, for their protection and for their guidance, for their wisdom, and for all of their staff. It's our responsibility as God's representatives here on earth that we pray for our leadership. And I just encourage everybody, do not allow yourselves to get depressed like I did last week. I went into a bad funk, didn't I, Rabbi? And I was in a funk for about 2 days, and I decided that, you know what, it is what it is, and it will be what it will be. But God is in control. And no matter what the enemy throws at us, he will give us the strength to stand up under it, whatever that it is. But our part is to pray for each other, pray for our leaders, vote appropriately, and stand up for truth. And I just pray that everything that's been concealed will be revealed, and that the Lord places on in the position of president, and all of the people who will be surrounding that man, whoever he is, that he will uphold the laws of the Lord in his office, that God will give him wisdom and guide him appropriately. Even so, come, Lord Yeshua, Bo Yeshua, come, Bo Yeshua, come.
Number one thing God loves to do is put the person that we need.
So Shabbat Shalom, and I hope to see you next week. Send me any questions or any prayer requests that you have, and I'll be happy to get back with you. Shabbat Shalom. And so we will do the Aaronic blessing real quick. Yerakaka Adonai Vishmareka, Yair Adonai Panavaleka Via Kanaka, Yasa Adonai Panavaleka Viasam Lakha Shalom. May the Lord bless you and keep you, make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you, and lift up his countenance upon you and establish peace for you. And so our response to that is, Ken Yahi Ritzon, let all that we put our hands to prosper. Let the beauty of Adonai Eloheinu be upon us. Prosper for us all the work that we do. Yes, prosper the work that we do. Shabbat Shalom.